Anyway, let's do our part two this week for our All-Star reserves. Surely we're not going to have the same names on the list again. So I look forward. Shall you go first this week?
Yeah, I can. I'm just opening up all my basketball reference links just to make sure I've got the stats that I want. Um, I don't know about you. Obviously, I did both conferences just to make sure I'm ready to talk. I found that the West was a little bit harder to fill out than the East. Obviously, you'd know more about that, but we'll start with the East. We'll start with the easy ones. Obviously, last week when we spoke, Trae Young and James Harden were both in consideration for that starting spot, and it's pretty logical to get the reserve spot. I think on the reserve spots, you can justify the poor records a little bit. Because you look at the individual impact that they're having, and Trae Young's having obviously a lot of offensive impact, has limitations defensively, but I don't think the sole reason as to why Atlanta's underperforming. I think you could make a counter case and say the reason why they're even in a position that they're in is because of his offensive talent. 27 was really 28 and 9.5 on pretty good shooting as well. 45, 37, and 90 in field goal, threes, and free throws, respectively. So I don't think that will hit much resistance. I have given some credit to James Harden. The more and more you kind of unpack it a little bit, the Kevin Durant factor is massive for Brooklyn, and obviously he's going to be out for a bit now, so we'll see how that plays a factor. But it almost feels like he's just there. Like he puts up the second best stats on that team, barring whatever Kyrie manages to muster up. But I don't know if he's impacting winning as much as if I told you right now, like who would you rather on the court, Kevin Durant or James Harden? It's like 100 people out of 100 say Kevin Durant.
Yeah, of course.
The stats look great, 22, 8, and 10. On decent shooting, the threes are a little bit down, but he's, field goal and free throw about the same. But yeah, I don't know. It was a lukewarm reception on that one, but I still feel like he's probably going to make it. Even just the name aspect as well, I think that has some weight.
Yep.
Let's go of another. Well, so this is where I got tricky. I've put Jared Allen in as a reserve. He's played pretty much all the games, averaged 16 and 11 essentially. Great shooting, obviously, as a center. High attributed win shares at a 6.4, higher than most of the other people listed. Cavs have obviously exceeded expectations. I'm going to put Jared Allen there. So I'm going to leave that one.
Jared Allen greater than Evan Mobley.
Yeah, look, the Evan Mobley stats don't help you, and rookies just typically don't get the credit that they deserve. And I don't think Evan Mobley's having an outlier of a season. If he was averaging 20 and 15 or something, I think that it'd be, an A, but I'm pretty sure Evan Mobley's at 14 and 9. Good impacts, but just not there yet. Those were the three easy ones for me, or at least those are the three that I could confidently chuck in and then be like, all right, cool. Now we're going to get into some asterisk-y ones. So what I've done is I have put in both of the Boston Celtics.
Wait, how many hours did you put in this week?
How many hours did I put in this week? Maybe just under an hour, I feel. Yeah, I don't worry. I've been ever more prepared ever since that.
Oh, excellent. After the first one.
The only recorded episode that we've done, and it's my least prepared. So I thought it'd be a little bit better. So I've given it to the two Celtics. Jaylen Brown and Jason Tatum both have all-star stats, and very similar to DeMar DeRozan, Zach LaVine, sort of that duo. The only difference is that the team's not performing anywhere near the expectation, and there's a couple of reasons for that. You look at coaching. Obviously, they've got a brand new coach, and I think there's some teething that happens with that. You've got personnel issues. I'm not necessarily saying the team's poorly constructed. I'm just saying that. Clearly, whatever the Boston Celtics have is not enough or isn't working. And
wait, they got two All-Stars, you think, and it's not enough?
No, it's because it's not. It's not. They're literally like they're the opposite of Zach LaVine and DeMar DeRozan right now. As in, those two players are very similar and do the same things, but it doesn't work on the Celtics. It works on the Bulls, maybe because they defer very well, maybe because there's a good like team cohesion around them. But on the Celtics, it doesn't. You know, both Jason Tatum and Jaylen Brown have had like, you know, season high games when the older is out. Whereas when they're together, it typically fluctuates. So Jason Tatum might have 30 tonight and Jaylen Brown might have 20, and then vice versa. They really can't. You know, there's a lot of murmurs going around, but, you know, one of the best things that I think Boston could do, you know, before it gets too late, is trade one of those people for an impact player or an impact package, because I don't think the two of them are going to work together. It's not similar. Well, you could actually make a case and say Kawhi Leonard and Paul George aren't working either, ignoring the injury thing, but they've had, you know, they had a pretty big playoff collapse, and you wouldn't have expected it based off the players' caliber. But I think it's just the similarities. You know, I think a lot of people get kind of confused. You know, they look at just put the best players together and it should work, and it just hasn't. I think now that time has progressed, it hasn't worked like that. Like Miami began that trend. I know this is a tangent, but Miami began that trend, and they went 2 or 4 in the finals. And you could make a case and say they really should have went like 3-1, because the Spurs series was a, you know, historic sort of impact on that. Putting best players together doesn't equate to success. You know, the Lakers had that failed dynasty.
That's proven, I think. Yeah.
That's proven. So this is a case where, yes, Jason Tatum and Jaylen Brown are both individually talented. Jaylen Brown at 24-6-3, Jason Tatum at 25-8-3. You know, both effective wing players, just not getting the team success that they want. So I know that that's contentious, but let me do the rest. I can give you a written list if you need it. I've went another player that might be met with a little bit of resistance. Who knows? I've went LaMelo Ball, averaging 19, 7, and 7 on a 50% effective field goal percentage. So very effective. Obviously, just high win shares, just impact. I think, you know, really has turned the Charlotte Hornets around. You could make a case and say that the Gordon Hayward acquisition and, you know, maybe some just better general managing across the board over the last couple of years. But I just think LaMelo Ball, a bit of a culture changer, and they're performing quite well. I want to pull up the East standings real quick, because that was one of the factors.
25-10, I think. Sorry, 25-20. I think over
so 500. So they're sitting 7th. And one of the big things there is, if you're looking at the East standings, the number 1 seed is currently on 28 wins. And the 11th seed, which is the Knicks, are on 22. So, you know, the gap between 1st and 11 isn't as massive as it used to be in the East. So I know that the Hornets are currently sitting 7th, but if they pull off 3 in a row, they are all of a sudden the 5th seed, for example. So I think there needs to be some recognition on that. And the last player I've went, and the games played is an issue here, and it came up on the West as well, was Jimmy Butler. Just 21, basically 6 and 6, similar effective field goal percentage, just a high win share. Basically, Miami's best player when he's on the floor. He's played 27 games, so you can make a case and say it's not enough, but Joel Embiid, I believe, played 29 or 30 when I did this research. It was on Tuesday. I think it's a very murky season, and so I think there's some odd stuff going on. I'm going to very quickly mention 3 players that I considered. I considered Miles Bridges, just for the fact, the same as the LaMelo spot, as in who would you take, because he's having obviously a most improved season. But I went with LaMelo only because I think the impact is there as the floor general versus the person who just essentially catches the lobs or, you know, gets their own offense. But also I just think for the flow of an all-star game, there's probably that aspect too. You know, LaMelo would be quite fun to watch in an all-star game opposed to Miles Bridges.
Of course.
The other two, Bradley Beal, you know, he's got the stats there. But the Wizards,
I actually looked at his stats. His stats are down across the board. He's just actually really playing poorly compared to his standards.
That's the thing. He's actually still got the stats though. That's the funny thing, right? Like he's still got 23, 4, and 6. But
he's shooting terribly. Have you seen his percentages? He can't make a shot this year with the Wilson ball.
The three's way down. And there's just a couple of weird things going on there. You know, I mean, obviously last season he was at 31 points, and now he's taken a bit of a dip at 23. But I also don't think he's the sole contributor for the Wizards having success. I think that there's just a better team all of a sudden, and that's, you know, he's not the impact on that. And Fred VanVleet, it was the last consideration on that. Obviously having a bit of a surge lately and putting up pretty good career numbers, but I don't I don't know, Toronto. So, look, I've got something against Toronto, it seems,
Yeah,
because I just feel that
is that what's going on?
this
It's a bias here. I get it. I get it.
I just
I
think that
see what's going
I
on.
just think there's a lot of credit given to Toronto, and I just think they're the only team currently playing a better fan base. They got those dodgy, Canadian protocols for COVID, and I don't think Fred VanVleet is the main reason why. I think that they're running a very unique lineup where they've got a lot of lengthy boys playing all 5 positions except for him, and I don't know. I also just think that VanVleet is a role player. I don't see him as an all-star.
Oh wow, this is some Van
It's
Fleet
hot take
hate here.
central.
Oh wow,
So
I'm going. Well, I'm going to just have to butt in there
him.
because
You'll have to tweet him directly.
Look, let me start with Fred VanVleet should definitely be an all-star. He's on my all-star list for the East. Okay. I know you can mistake him from a role player, and of course he has a supporting cast that's got championship quality players. Obviously from the team that won a few years ago. But he's the new Kyle Lowry of the Raptors. He's the heart and soul of the team. He's the engine. It's like LaMelo leading the Hornets to obviously an all to the playoffs, and obviously therefore deserving of an all-star spot. It's the same sort of role that VanVleet plays at Toronto, and Toronto has got hot lately. I think they're now knocking on the play-in bracket. And if they keep winning a few more, like you said, the 1 through to 11th or so is fairly close. They could potentially move out of that bracket and into the top 6. So I think they obviously had injuries as well at the start of the season to Siakam and things like that. So they had players out, and now they're starting to get some consistency. So I definitely have VanVleet on my East All-Star list. I will definitely agree with 5 out of your 7. So I did have Jimmy Butler. I think he definitely is deserving of the All-Star. He's again the Miami sort of engine there. I think they've definitely they follow his lead. I think there, so he's definitely worth an All-Star nod again. Trae Young, I think, is a no-brainer. No one's going to argue that. I think he's going to get voted in one way or another, even potentially as a starter. So he's a great player. Atlanta definitely not playing up to last season's expectations, I guess. But it's probably, in all honesty, they're probably playing more to play where their realistic ceiling was with the roster as it is versus last year where they got hot when McMillan came in and they just reeled off all these games and then suddenly all the way to the East Finals. It was a bit of a hot streak. It was crazy, but it hasn't been sustainable clearly. So I've got James Harden, obviously. I will agree that he is an all-star. Whether he's as deserving as he used to be, perhaps you could make that argument, but I think he's still a key component of the Brooklyn makeup, and his stats definitely sort of say all-star, all-star sort of caliber player. And obviously I did have LaMelo Ball, so same reason, like I said, with VanVleet. LaMelo is the key to, I guess, the Hornets' success as far as I'm concerned. Of course, they got Bridges now having a breakout season, and Gordon Hayward's back again, healthy. All these things have obviously, helped them, really move up the standings right now. But LaMelo really just drives the offense, I think. And like you said, who wouldn't want to see him in an All-Star game? So I think you definitely give him a nod there. So I do have Jason Tatum. I do not have Jaylen Brown. I do not have Jaylen Brown. I do have Jason Tatum. And I looked at Jaylen Brown and I looked at Jason Tatum and I said, Tatum's the better player. That's it. I think, to me, because I do have another player, obviously, that Tatum is the better player than Jaylen Brown. Jaylen Brown is borderline all-star, but as we sort of spoke about last week, I think we do reward some level of success. And Boston are not really as successful as they're hoping. You obviously sort of touched upon other or reasons why, perhaps, but I think even like Charlotte I think beat them today, and they got obviously a significantly better record there. And Boston was projected to be probably a top 4 team potentially, and it hasn't happened. In that situation. So I think Jason Tatum is definitely deserving of an All-Star nod there, but not 2 All-Stars in that Boston lineup. So it leaves me with one spot. I can't believe you didn't even mention his name. Domantas Sabonis. He was an All-Star last year. He just got a triple-double today. He's an All-Star. He should be an All-Star again. Again, it's not his fault that Indiana sort of, I don't know, they probably need to tear it down a little bit and really, go for a different sort of lineup, probably similar to Boston. Indiana's probably underperforming to what the expectations were like Boston, and they probably need to make a few trades here and there to balance out the roster or whatnot. But Sabonis's stats at the moment are definitely all-star caliber. I think he's started to settle into the season now. It was a bit of a slow start, I think, but he's he's definitely putting up the same numbers as last season, and he's a triple double, sort of potential every night from the four positions. So it's I think it's definitely an all-star nod there over Jaylen Brown because he's the key player there, I guess, with the Pacers. Yeah, I think. I don't know. Did you even look at his stats?
Yeah, I mean, I've just pulled him up again just to see what my logic was. So
yeah, read me his stats. I haven't pulled up any stats today. So what are his stats?
So he's on 19 points a game with just basically 5 assists and 11 or basically 12 rebounds.
19, 11, and 5. I think that's an all-star.
Look, the thing is, I think the reason why I went against it, the Celtics are 7 wins ahead of them. So I'm not even talking about pole position here. I'm talking about seven wins ahead of them. So the Pacers are actually the last competitive East team because then it's just Detroit and Magic. So
he's the pity vote. It's like when Nikola Vucevic was getting voted in when it was at Orlando.
Okay, so now I'm glad that you mentioned him because that wasn't someone that I considered. But let me pull up his stats because if we're rewarding winning, then I think Vucevic would deserve it over DeMontis. He's averaging. So Vucevic is on 16, 11, 3 on a winning team, like the number one team on the East. So you could make that case. I think I chase the stats for the reserves just a little bit more. I think the records become a little, less important on that. I don't know why we do it like that because we are so, we're so strict on the winning for the top 5, but then, the reserves get to have a bit more of a casual time. I think as I said, I think Jaylen Brown and Jason Tatum are a 1A, 1B. Jason Tatum's clearly the 1A, but I don't think Jaylen Brown's that far behind. And I think if one's out, the other can have the all-star performance to get the Celtics over the hump. Just to bring it back to the Celtics as well, they've got the most fourth quarter collapses out of anybody. So the Lakers hold a very interesting record of winning the most games by the smallest possible margins. Like they have so many close games or games that go to overtime. Whereas the Celtics, they win up until the fourth quarter and then they just blow it. They'll blow about 15-point leads. I think they've done it at least 5-6 times this season. It's just, there's something going on with the mental aspect of they just take the foot off the brake. I don't know if the coaching just laxes. I don't know what happens, but we might be talking about them differently. And because of the way that the East is currently structured, in 10 days, they could be top 5 again. So,
fair enough. So shall we go to the West?
Let's go to the West because I think
we got 5 out of 7 there. We agreed 5 out of 7. That's not too bad. As I actually thought the East was much harder to pick. Than the West, because my West cut candidates was much shorter than the East, but you'll probably disagree with me. So anyway,
I had 5 cut candidates for the West, so this is interesting. Maybe we should have done the opposite conference.
So I think a no-brainer here, first reserve spot, if he is not a starter, which he probably will be a starter, I don't know, who knows actually, but is Luka. All right, Luka, I think his stats are down a little bit. I think he's not shooting as good as well as he has previously last few seasons, but he's the heart and soul of the Mavericks. I think without him they'll be they're back to the lottery. I think so. I think Luka definitely is an all-star. The second player here, I don't know, you might not have this player on your list, is Draymond. I think Draymond is an all-star. All right, and I can see that face there that you don't have Draymond on your list, I don't think, but he is an all-star because he, again, he's never put up traditional stats. That's the point. Draymond has never been a 20-point per game player, all right, but he's a player that impacts winning. He's been out now a bit, and I think Golden State now have, to a certain extent, cooled down. After that real hot start that they had. Of course, they're still competitive. They're still working Clay back in now. Steph's been in and out a little bit, and things like that. But when he was there, all right, at the start of the season, they were just rolling. they were just rolling. And it's not just him. Let's be clear, it's not just him. Okay, Steph's obviously a starter. Okay, and they've got the right pieces. All right, on that roster. Okay, but Draymond, I think, is deserving of another All-Star nod. I don't know how many All-Star games has he made? 2, maybe, I think. Or
I think when they were having their championship run for those 5 years, he might have made it about 3 or 4 times.
You reckon 4? Oh, now I feel like a stat I got to pull up here. It's
I'm gonna pull up as well. Look, I'm gonna be honest with you. Absolutely hate this pick because I looked at his stats. He averages
3 times.
3 times. He's a triple single machine, right? He's on like 7, 8, and 7 or something like that. It's not the Golden State Warrior that I would have put in as the consolation picks, but we'll hold off on that. But I'm very curious now because you've taken a spot away from someone else, and it's I'm very curious how this is going to play out.
Look, I'll make you happier here, all right? My third pick is Chris Paul. All right, CP3 is an All-Star. Okay, I think CP3 is an All-Star. He should be in the All-Star game. I know you're voting your whole Phoenix team into this reserves list here, okay? So, but CP3 is an All-Star. Again, he's really set the culture, into right direction since he arrived, and he's I don't think that if he doesn't make the All-Star game, that's a riot, I think, in Phoenix. All right, so CP3 is an All-Star. The fourth player here. Now, this one was a tough one. I looked at all the options in the West, and like I said, after you narrowed it down, I think this player is deserving an All-Star nod. I'm curious how many times, I should have done this research earlier, right? But how many times has Karl Anthony Towns been an All-Star?
I want to say like once.
You reckon? It's not even coming out. All-Star.
I don't think it'd be a first nod. I feel like he's had it once before. 2 All-Star selections. So yes, it'll be his 3rd All-Star selection.
He would be his 3rd All-Star selection. Yeah. And finally, Minnesota's somewhat relevant. All right, they're actually competitive. They're still at this point of the season looking to play some level of playoffs or the play-in at least. Of course, again, it's always important that he's had a cast around him now with Anthony Edwards continuing to get better each season. Obviously D'Angelo Russell's now healthy and sort of putting games together. They've got a bit of a bench, but he powers the Timberwolves. That's simple as that. His stats, clearly show that, and I think again he's deserving of a All-Star nod this season to make the reserves. My fifth option here, player here is Donovan Mitchell. I think again Utah, definitely a two-headed sort of team there. Gobert obviously anchors one end, and obviously Mitchell anchors the other end, or gets all the points and really spearheads that offense. They got a great supporting cast again that really sort of works there. I know that there's a bit of drama. I was reading this article about the drama in Utah, but feels like something to write about, right? So, but yeah, obviously I voted Gobert into the starting spot there, but obviously I think Mitchell is definitely an All-Star again. The 6th pick here, you'll be happy I chose Devin Booker. He scored 48 points. He was on the fringe for a while. The last few days on the fringe. Then he got 48 points, and I said, you know what? Yeah, I think he is an All-Star player. All right, so Booker is in the All-Star game for you. Therefore, Phoenix have 2 All-Stars there at this point. You're like, yeah, pick Ayton for the 3rd one, yeah? Is that?
I think we're going to have a very interesting post your last selection. We're going to have a very interesting discussion.
Devin Booker, all right, obviously is an All-Star, I think. How many times is he an All-Star? You should know this stat. One time.
It's either once or twice.
Yeah.
I'm not sure if. And last season he was like injury replacement to an injury.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah. So I think it's been once. I think it's once. Yeah. So,
yeah.
All right. And then my 7th pick, my last pick here for the West, which I had a few considerations. In fact, actually, well, I did have a few, but it really narrowed down to Ayton. I considered him. All right. Wiggins, which you're probably going to say Wiggins is greater than Draymond Green, but we're going to disagree there probably. 100%. And Brandon Ingram.
Yep.
All right, Brandon Ingram. And my final pick goes to Brandon Ingram. All right. I think Brandon Ingram should be an all-star because without him, the Pelicans would be nowhere. I don't know if you looked at the stats at the moment. Well, when he missed a bunch of games, and that was when they lost all these games in a row, and they were like going nowhere. He came back, and they became competitive again. They're like your new Timberwolves. They're like your new Timberwolves, you know. And I don't know whether Zion's ever going to come out this season. Probably not. Who knows? But I guess Ingram makes them competitive. Okay, he doesn't put up huge stats. Okay, I think it's like 22 points and maybe 6-7 boards or something like that. But he helps them win. All right, and again, they're sort of knocking on that sort of playing. I think the 8 to 10 sort of spot. I think. All right, and it's still fairly close. I think the standings in the West. So I think Ingram, out of those three options that I narrowed down to, should be the last selection as an All-Star in the West.
All right. I was a little tired before this. I'm not going to lie, but you really perked me up. 407. We're in agreement on 407. So I agree with you. Donovan Mitchell, quite an easy choice, averaging like 25, 5 and 5, essentially, all-star numbers. We've given other players a nod for less. Devin Booker, obviously, it's not biased. He's also averaging about 25 points a game, irrelevant of the 48. Shooting very effective this season. Very, very effective. We're talking 51% effective field goal, 40% from 3, 45 from 2, and 86 from the line. Just playing the role better.
You could read his stats all night, right?
I'm trying to. I ordered a swingman jersey today. They're so limited, the Valley ones, that I had to get a youth.
The Valley, nice.
Really it's the youth one that's like extra large or something. So I did the measurements. It should fit. I'm very maybe have it for next week. Luka, obviously, I think you know what, you kind of hit the point a little bit about the lottery thing. Their relevance is built around Luka for however long, and the Mavs are quite an interesting franchise because without Dirk, who did they really acquire over a 20-year period? That was a complete game changer. They acquired names here and there, but game changer, it's just not the way that franchise seems to operate. And the other person, was that it? Donovan, Devin, Luka, and Karl Anthony Towns. I agree with you on that one. Timberwolves currently sitting 7th, 1 win away from being 6th. Real quick, I'm just going to bring up the West standings. It's quite an interesting field. The East is, as I said, 1 through 11, not very far apart. Whereas 1 through 11 on the West is the difference between almost 15 games. You've got 3 teams at the top: Suns, Warriors, and Grizzlies.
They're streaking, yeah.
Utah kind of lagging behind a tiny bit. They're on a bit of a losing streak, but they're still at 29. Then it's I say a tiny drop off, but it's a drop off to the middle of the pack where it's Mavericks, Nuggets, Timberwolves, Lakers, and Clippers between 26 and 22 wins respectively. And then it's your kind of play-in tournament. And I don't even know if anyone's tanking, because the Trailblazers are 10th with 18 and 26 is their record. But the Rockets, who are dead last, are 14 and 32. So there's really not a lot of distance between those ones. So when I was looking at, all-star selections, I really factored in how are people performing and how are they impacting a team. So like you referenced with Brandon Ingram. So here is an interesting one. I don't have Chris Paul as an all-star. He's averaging 13.8 and 10 assists, which are good numbers. Has an incredible impact on the game. But
you think Booker is more important than Chris Paul?
I think that's revisionist. I think Booker had deserved all-star selections prior to Chris Paul arriving. I think his individual talent is an all-star level. And clearly what happens is, like, a lot of people frame it like this: Chris Paul had to come to the team to make Devin Booker relevant. Let's pretend in a hypothetical universe, Devin Booker got traded to a different franchise. Is he going to be an impressive all-star caliber player at that franchise? Yes, he was always going to have the capability to score 20 plus, right? And he's always, like, the issue with Devin Booker is that he needs to develop playmaking, / it's happened over the last couple of years. Defensively, he is competent. He's just not going to be a standout player like Kawhi or Paul George or anyone like that. And that's it. He's a very effective scorer, and that's continuing to increase as time goes on. It's not to discredit Chris Paul's impact. It's simply just saying he is 37 or 38 years old, and essentially at this point, he is scoring 5 to 6 baskets a night. He's probably 4 baskets when you factor in free throws, and he's setting up his teammates and controlling the offense. Has a high level of impact, but unfortunately, that's not the way the All-Star game's structured. Okay. Otherwise, people like Draymond Green would be in the All-Star game. The West team would be a legitimate team, opposed to a bunch of guys.
I'm intrigued what your last 3 picks are.
So I flipped it. I went DeAndre Ayton. I think DeAndre Ayton deserves a spot because he is very similar to the Jarrett Allen, Domantas Sabonis position. He is averaging 16 and 11 essentially on fantastic effective field goal on the best team in the West. He would deserve a spot, especially if we're factoring in some front court aspects as well. Why is he important? I think the biggest part with DeAndre Ayton is when we'll just put it into the universe. When it's the Western Conference Finals and it's us against Golden State, he is going to be the difference between us winning or losing. It is not going to be Chris Paul and it's not going to be Devin Booker. He's going to be the most important part. And when he has played well, we look unstoppable. And when he has played like a mortal and his backups essentially produce, on par with what he's doing, we are a beatable team. And so I think there is all-star numbers already with greater all-star potential. I'd pay it out.
So let me just clarify here, because you are a Suns man, yeah?
Yep.
You're saying that because Suns they're first, right? I think
Correct.
You guys are first right now. Yep. You guys grabbed that spot again. Yep. That if you took CP3 out and kept Booker and Ayton still, you would still be sitting at the top of the West.
No, of course not. But it's not. Look, the way that you're framing this is too simple. It's, how would I put it? There's a difference between a good team composition and an all-star selection. Chris Paul is sacrificing. If Chris Paul is in a different setting, he might be averaging 18 or 20 points and 10 assists. Those are all-star numbers / that's like all-star measurable impact. The all-star game is not about the intangibles, unfortunately. It's not about that, all right? Otherwise, Alex Caruso should be in serious consideration because he is essentially the Draymond Green of the East. Because when he plays for the Bulls,
that's a stretch, right? That's a stretch. I don't know who's going to take that comparison.
One, fan vote, but two, he has a defensive. Okay, he has a massive defensive impact because he has left the Lakers and they are in absolute shambles on the perimeter. He has joined the Bulls, and when he plays and when he doesn't, there is a massive difference between the impact that team has on defense. If we're picking that, we'd be creating a role player thing. I'm not calling Chris Paul a role player. He's in an asterisk part of his career. He's having a down year in terms of his stats, but it's by design. He has to pace himself to get to the playoffs. He normally averages 18 points. He's currently averaging 13, right? He's down on his shooting. He's legitimately.
I see you found enough reasons not to vote CP3, and so I'll leave you at that.
He was in consideration. So obviously right now I've got Donovan, I've got Devin, I've got DeAndre, Booker, and Carlin. Okay, I'm going to go with the considered. I considered Andrew Wiggins, right? Because I looked at Draymond Green. I gave him the nod. I said, I know the name. I know the impact. Is he actually doing anything? No. Wiggins is having more of an impact on that in terms of stats, in terms of the versatility that it gives them. I looked at DeJounte Murray, right? Because the standings get really loose down the bottom of the West, and because I was just looking for that, he's averaging 19, 8, and 8. Played pretty much every single game.
But Spurs never get any love, right?
Look, Spurs can't get any love. Perhaps one person stumbles across this, be like, this is a pod worth listening to because they have some Spurs rep. So that's simply it. He's having a very, if we're talking about the role player Olympics, right? He is a front runner of that. All right. But he wasn't picked it. I looked at De'Aaron Fox because, again, the standings are a bit of a joke, and he's their best performing player at 21, 4, and 5. But Sacramento's not doing anything. Who cares? Looked at Brandon Ingram. The reason why I left him as low as it is because the Pelicans are in that cellar dweller territory of Thunder and Rockets. And I'm not sure if you remember that impressive game winner that Devontae Graham hit against Oklahoma. It was the one where it was the full court heave. It's very impressive. That was against the Thunder. The Thunder and Pelicans right now are 16 and 14. So it's in like the Pelicans have 16 wins, Thunder has 14. If that game had went differently, e.g. the full court heave did not go through, Oklahoma and Pelicans are on the exact same record. Now that's one example. What I'm saying is they are not different teams. Now, why am I bringing this up? Because I listed Shai Gilgeous-Alexander as the other pick. He's averaging 22, almost 5 rebounds and 5.5 assists on very good shooting. Why is that important? He's on a very bad team and has okay win share. It's just approaching 3. But other teams will offensively scheme for him and defensively scheme for him. They pretty much know, it's like, that's the dude. That's the dude that's going to do everything. And those stats, I personally think there's some stats that are a little bit harder than others, right? His stats on a pretty subpar team are impressive, right? He's averaging more points than other players that we've listed this evening, and he's doing it on a team that he would get the majority of the focus from the other defense. And yes, they might be at 14 and 30, but they pull off a couple of wins in a row and they're right in playoff contention, or play in contention. Sorry. And the last one, and this is another hot take, Paul George. I know he hasn't played in a very long time, but he played 26 games. And when he did play, he averaged 25, 7, and 5, which are better numbers than many of the players that we've listed this evening. And pretty much the only thing that was keeping the Clippers in relevance.
How long is he out for?
I can't remember. Was it a calf strain that he's had? What is it?
Everyone's forgotten about Paul George, right? Is that what's going on?
No,
here?
and that's the thing. And you know, like, not to be like, people need to put some respect on his name. It's just more like those are he's having, his career average is 20. He's averaging 25.
I think you got some interesting picks there. I look, if you want to flip CP3 for Ayton, I'll give you that one. All right. I don't even want to go there. We'll be going for 2 hours, okay? You sort of applied the SGA selection that OKC are not that far out of the top 10 for the play-in, yet Pelicans are 2 spots ahead of them, so two games ahead, and only 2 games out of the 10. So, but you didn't want to reward Ingram for that success. You wanted to give it to SGA. I feel like there's a little bit of a conflicting analysis there on how you gave it to SGA, if that's the reason why you get to SGA, because their stats are probably very similar, in fact, you know, in that sort of sense. And the Pelicans are a little bit ahead. And the key here that OKC, well, you know what? OKC are not constructed to win now anyway. They're very young, so that's fair enough, okay? They're probably somewhat exceeding expectations or being competitive in that sort of sense, besides that huge blowout they had a while ago now, all right? But the Pelicans here are playing some level of competitive basketball, waiting for Zion. Like, basically, Ingram's the key to that. If Zion comes back, which is a big if, okay, can they go on a run? And if they can go on a run and grab the 9th or 10th spot, with Zion back healthy, potentially, can they make an upset in the play-in? Okay, now they're in the playoffs. Okay, all big ifs, okay, but Ingram keeps the Pelicans relevant in that situation, and they are ahead of the standings of the Thunder right now, but you gave it to SGA. All right, so I'm going to have to say, well, I don't know how you want to fully justify that. I guess, yeah, what was the other one that was the different one?
Oh, there was a couple. Paul George. I did look at Paul George. Paul George, you know what? Paul George probably will make the All-Star game because people love Paul George, yeah, you know. And I don't know when he's due back because he's been out a while now. So whether he'll end up being replaced with someone else, I'm not too sure. But I look, you could make that argument. I think you could make that. I'm not gonna say otherwise. I think though at the start of the season, when the Clippers were, I don't know, they were hovering around 500, and they're about 500 now. They're 2 games below 500. Okay, I think to me, that's a telling stat that PG didn't make them significantly better. He puts up numbers, but he doesn't make them significantly better. I think in that aspect, let's say going back to my pick of Ingram, okay, as that 7th and last spot, versus Paul George, I would still go Ingram because Ingram helps the Pelicans win. Okay, even if his stats are less, and that's why I guess I picked Draymond. So I guess, you know, each person obviously has their own logic, I guess, how they pick their players. But I guess I think, again, going back to the winning component, these players here do help them win, just like CP3 helps them win. I think Suns are significantly worse off without CP3 versus the other 2 players. Okay, in that sort of sense. But again, that's my opinion, and I guess that's how my picks would be different to yours. Yeah, I think there's also, we kind of touched on it a little bit, but it's impact on a team or impact on the winning, as you mentioned, opposed to just the raw stats. And I guess we've been conditioned over the years to look at all-star numbers, right? You've put up all-star numbers to get that selection most of the time. There are a couple of anomalies. I think the Hawks, when they were number one in the East and they had 4 players selected, and no individual there was probably better than other players on a worse team, but they got the nod. And I think if we were doing it like that, then we aren't even, to be honest with you, the bench is pretty much made up of 3 Suns, Donovan Mitchell, Luka Doncic, Karl Anthony Towns, and probably either Andrew Wiggins or Draymond Green, and then the All-Star team is essentially just 3 or 4 teams represented. I think that there's one thing that I found is especially in the flip between Ingram and Alexander, for example, there are a lot of players. There are a lot of those mid-tier 20 to 25 scorers on bad teams, and who do you give the nod to a little bit? And so, you've mentioned take Brandon Ingram off the Pelicans; they're no longer relevant. I think Shea is probably Oklahoma's best player.
I will not disagree with that.
And they're also just as irrelevant. I think I personally, I don't think that Brandon Ingram has a style that's conducive to winning per se, whereas I think Shea actually does. I know that the record doesn't give them that benefit, but I think that's more. I don't know if that's an issue of the team surrounding them or the philosophy of the team in terms of approaching games.
Look, I'm not going to dispute SGA is the best player and the franchise player at OKC, but I just think that Ingram has had a more impactful season, and his statistics are similar on a team that's probably not as deep in certain aspects in that sort of sense. So, that's why I picked him. Just as a fun fact, you like fun facts, right? I put up some stats because I didn't pull up any stats this week because I didn't have the time. But yeah. Paul George, okay, the Paul George conversation. All right, we got a player A averaging 24, 4 rebounds and 7 assists. Player B, 24 points, 7 rebounds and 5 assists. And you think you voted Paul George into the All-Star game. And both players are now injured or currently out. Who's the other player?
Is it Damian Lillard?
Lillard. Why would we not put Lillard into the All-Star game based upon stats? But I think it's the same.
Around his down year was his main thing.
I think that's the same thing. I think with PG, I think like I said before, look, he puts up numbers, but I don't think he's as the team's playing as well as they're playing now with him or without him. And I guess and to me, I guess that's why he didn't make my 7. And I guess when injuries, we talked about injuries. You said you mentioned how many games like Butler had played and things like that, and that is something to consider. And I know he did play the front end of the season and has been out a bit now, but he's sort of, I think to me, he sort of slipped down that top 7 at the moment, and that's why he didn't make my cut. So you're very generous to give him a spot, I think.
No, you know what? Now that you've brought up the Dame Lillard, because I think I wrote Dame Lillard off because he's out for the season. I think that's the approach that they're taking. He probably is more deserving than Paul George, to be honest. I'd probably put him over it with a higher win share as well.
There you go.
I'll change my thing right now. Dame Lillard. Look, I think for me, I think we both agreed on it. I think that the first, let's go 10 positions per team.
Yep.
Pretty easy to agree upon. And it's actually those last 2 spots. It's almost as if the All-Star teams, for the first time in a while, feel too large, as in we don't need this many All-Stars. It doesn't feel as warranted, because the snubs that we'll end up inevitably talking about will be guys like Paul George, Damian Lillard, guys who've been injured for half the season, who mimic stats or have better stats than some of the dudes picked. And we'll be saying, were they snubbed? That would be the conversation point.
Well, it's funny because some of the players that were on the East cut list are from the Bucks. I looked at them Middleton, and they're streaking too. Drew, and they were both, I looked at them, I really considered them. I almost wanted to vote them in, but it was like, you got to make your cut at 7, right? And I think they're just missing that fringe. But, the Bucks are starting to streak now, and it's not all Giannis. Let's be clear. There could be, I was probably leaning towards Holiday versus Middleton, but, they're very similar sort of impact as a second role player. But, again, you got to make your cut somewhere.
But that's interesting because, we look at Golden State and, let's say Clay was healthy from the start of the season, we'd probably have Steph and Clay in there. And then because they are second in the West or even first in that hypothetical universe, we'd be saying, does Draymond deserve a spot? Draymond, like, who's more important to their team, Draymond or Chris Middleton / Drew Holiday?
Draymond.
All right,